He paid for first class like everyone else. But when a white passenger showed up late, the crew told him to move. What they didn't know, he owned the system they worked for. 5 minutes later, everything changed. By the time the plane landed, careers were destroyed, and justice had quietly taken flight. Welcome to my channel. Get ready for a gripping story that will leave you speechless. Comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe as we dive right into the story. It was supposed to be just another business trip, one of many. But the weight Jamal Oak carried into that airport wasn't in his designer luggage. It was in his skin, his history, and the quiet awareness that no amount of success could shield him completely from how the world saw him. He wore a crisp navy suit, tailored to perfection. His wrist carried the weight of a limited edition timepiece, and his shoes echoed the confidence of a man who'd built an empire from scratch. But even with all that, eyes still flicked over him with skepticism as he walked into the VIP lounge. Some glanced with curiosity, others with indifference, a few with subtle dismissal. Jamal didn't need the attention. In fact, he preferred anonymity. That was why he booked the flight under a low-profile alias. He wasn't in the mood for small talk or headlines. Just peace and a smooth flight. The attendant at the counter scanned his boarding pass and forced a smile. Mr. O, she paused at the unfamiliar name. Her eyes darted to the seat assignment. 1A. First class. The prime spot. Her lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. Is there a problem? Jamal asked gently, his voice calm but alert. No, not at all. Enjoy your flight, she replied with a practiced smile. But the shift in her tone was undeniable. As he stepped into the aircraft, the air felt cooler. The kind of cool that came not from the air conditioning but from judgment suspended in the air. A tall white man in a blazer had just settled into his seat, chatting easily with one of the flight attendants who laughed at his joke. Loudly, a bit too loudly. Jamal reached his seat. One window. He sat down, exhaled, and reached for the in-flight magazine. But peace didn't last. Barely 10 minutes later, just as boarding wrapped up, a young blonde flight attendant approached with a tight smile. Excuse me, sir, she began, her voice coated with artificial warmth. There's been a change. We need you to move to another seat. Just a quick adjustment, nothing serious. Jamal blinked. I beg your pardon? There's a passenger with a higher tier booking. We'll be moving you to another section. It's still premium class, very comfortable. He looked at her. Curious. But I booked this seat weeks ago. Paid in full. Yes, we understand, she said quickly, but it's a matter of priority seating. It won't affect your flight. Is this about my name? He asked softly. The attendant's smile cracked just slightly. No, sir. Just routine adjustments. Behind her, the same white man from earlier appeared. She turned toward him and gestured to 1A like she was presenting a gift. Jamal didn't miss the flicker of smugness in the man's face. And in that moment, something inside Jamal shifted. Not rage, not outrage, but something heavier. That tired weight of being reminded, once again, that to some people, success only mattered if it came in the right skin. He stood slowly. Not a word. Not a scene. He simply picked up his briefcase and moved to the alternate seat. Premium, this. But not first. Not where he was supposed to be. He sat down by the aisle. Cold air brushed his temple. He closed his eyes. He'd been here before. The investor meetings where he was mistaken for an assistant. The tech conferences where he was asked, "So who did you co-found it with?" As though the idea of him being the mind behind a billion-dollar firm was a statistical error. He remembered his mother's voice, firm but loving. You will have to be twice as good, and still they might not see you. But you must never shrink yourself. Never. A soft voice stirred him from his thoughts. Excuse me, are you Jamal Oak? Turned. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, sat beside him. Nigerian too, judging by her accent. Sorry to disturb you, she said quietly, but I recognize you from the TechWest panel last year. You spoke about building access for African youth. I just want to say, you're one of the reasons I started coding." Jamal's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Thank you," he said simply. She hesitated. "I couldn't help but notice, they moved you from first class." Jamal glanced out the window. "They did." Her brows creased. "That doesn't seem right." Jamal shrugged, not out of indifference, but out of years of practice. "It rarely does. But some things speak louder when you don't say anything at all." The rest of the flight unfolded with professional coldness. His calls for water were delayed. The attendant barely made eye contact. Meanwhile, laughter trickled from the first-class cabin where his seat now held another man. But Jamal's mind wasn't on service anymore. As soon as the plane reached cruising altitude and Wi-Fi was enabled, he opened his laptop, typed swiftly, then picked up his phone. He called his assistant, Isaiah. "Find out who handles operations for this airline. I need a direct line to the board." "Not tomorrow. Tonight." Isaiah, used to this tone, replied, "Understood." Jamal didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The plane began to descend hours later, wheels kissing the tarmac under the dull morning sky. Jamal remained seated until the seatbelt light dimmed. People stood. Some glanced his way. Others didn't. He knew what was coming. And this time he was ready. He watched the cabin door open, and uniformed personnel began to enter, more than the usual reception team. There were suits among them. Senior-looking. Confused glances exchanged in whispers. Then one of them pointed directly at him. "Mr. Oak?" the woman asked with sudden politeness. He stood slowly. "Yes." "Sir, we're terribly sorry. We weren't aware you were on this flight. Please follow us." The young lady beside him watched, stunned. The crew watched too. And the flight attendant who had reassigned his seat? Her face went pale. Jamal turned once, scanning the crew's faces. No anger in his eyes, just clarity. He didn't need to say a word. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest form of justice. The glass doors slid open, and the airport's private terminal bustled with a quiet tension. A line of luxury sedans gleamed in the morning sun, but Jamal Oak didn't head for them immediately. Instead, he paused on the tarmac, letting the weight of the moment settle. Behind him, the flight crew lingered uneasily near the aircraft, whispering among themselves, their confidence from earlier now clouded by confusion. The same flight attendant who had forced him out of his seat stood frozen, trying not to meet his eyes. Jamal didn't give her the satisfaction of acknowledgement. Not yet. One of the airline executives, a tall woman with tightly coiled hair and a badge clipped to her blazer, approached with urgency. "Mr. Oak, I'm Cassandra Ayers, Regional Director of Northski Airlines. We sincerely apologize. We had no idea you were on board." Jamal adjusted the cuff of his jacket. "Why should that matter?" he asked softly but firmly. "Shouldn't everyone be treated with the same respect, regardless of who they are?" Cassandra hesitated. "Yes, of course. You're absolutely right. That's exactly why this situation is unacceptable, and it's being addressed immediately." Jamal gave a slight nod, his face unreadable. Inside, however, his heart was a storm, memories, frustration, and quiet fury swirling together. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about a system, a pattern, a reality that he and millions like him had faced their entire lives. He followed Cassandra into the private terminal, where an entire team stood waiting, some with forced smiles, others with visible shame. One man in a gray suit stepped forward. "Mr. Oak, we've reviewed the flight footage and logs. We're launching an internal audit immediately." The crew's behavior was inexcusable. Jamal didn't respond. Instead, he sat down and opened his tablet. "I'm not here for apologies," he said. "I'm here for change." He pulled up a file, *SkySync Technologies Internal AI Bias Report *, and slid it across the glass table. "This is what we do. We build software to identify and track systemic patterns, bias, discrimination, prejudice hidden under protocol. Your airline just gave us a front-row case study. The executives exchanged nervous glances. I'm tired, Jamal continued. Tired of being told it was just a misunderstanding. Tired of being the exception when we shouldn't need one. Silence filled the room. For once, no one interrupted. He stood. You want to make this right? Start by cleaning house. Then invest in your crew. Real training. Real accountability. And no, I don't want a lifetime membership or some PR tweet. I want to know that the next black man, woman, or child who steps on your plane isn't seen as an intruder in a space they paid for. Cassandra cleared her throat. We'll make that happen. Jamal nodded once. Then he turned and walked out. The ride to his hotel was quiet, but his phone wasn't. Notifications exploded. Calls from board members, news alerts, and social media buzz. Someone on the flight had already posted a clip. It showed the crew asking him to move. His calm demeanor, the uncomfortable silence of the cabin, the white man settling into his seat like nothing happened. The clip had gone viral. #hashtag he paid to was trending. Jamal let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was surreal. This was never his intention. But maybe, just maybe, this moment was bigger than him. His assistant, Isaiah, called. Sir, media requests are coming in like crazy. Everyone wants to talk to you. Schedule one interview, Jamal replied. Just one. Which one? The one that listens. The rest can wait. That evening, Jamal sat by the window of his suite, watching the sky slowly darken. He held a glass of water, untouched, and stared out over the city. Somewhere below, people were going about their lives, some unaware, others inspired, and some still skeptical. He thought about his father, a mechanic who once told him, dignity isn't what people give you, it's what you don't let them take. He remembered his early days, coding at midnight, pitching to investors who smiled at his ambition but doubted his ability. He remembered how many times he was told no before someone finally said yes. The knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Isaiah stepped in, holding a printout. The crew members involved? 2 have been suspended. 1, the flight attendant, was just dismissed. Jamal raised his brows but said nothing. Isaiah hesitated. You okay, sir? Jamal looked at him. No, he said honestly. But I'm not surprised. He paused, then added, It's not about punishment, Isaiah. It's about awakening. People have to understand the weight of their choices. Because too many of us carry that weight alone every single day. Isaiah nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. You turned a seat change into a movement. Jamal gave a tired smile. I didn't. The system did. I just stopped letting it slide. Meanwhile, on the other side of the internet, stories poured in, passengers sharing similar experiences, others admitting they hadn't noticed until now. Some comments were ugly, as expected, but many were filled with support. A woman wrote, My son watched that video and asked me why they moved the nice man. I didn't know what to tell him. But thank you, Mr. Oak, for showing him that silence doesn't mean weakness. Another read, I've sat in those same seats and felt those same eyes. Today I feel seen. Jamal read them all. Slowly. Thoughtfully. Then he opened his laptop and started drafting a public letter. Not a press release. Not a damage control statement. A message. One that said, We've been patient long enough. Now we lead, with grace, with truth, and with fire that doesn't burn us, but lights the path for those behind us, He hit save. Tomorrow would be louder than today. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to rest. Because this story, his story, was just beginning. The video now had 3.8 million views. Jamal sat quietly in the green room of a major news studio in London, waiting for his segment. The room buzzed with activity, producers, stylists, lighting checks, but he was still. His calm exterior belied the storm inside. Not of anger, but of memory. Every scene from the flight was playing back, not just in his mind, but across the world. Except now, the man they dismissed as just another passenger had a name, a face, and a story the world wanted to hear. But this wasn't about him. Not entirely. The makeup artist glanced up at him. "You're a lot more composed than most folks who come through here," she said, gently brushing powder under his eyes. Jamal smiled faintly. "That's what years of being told to calm down teaches you." She paused, understanding his words far beyond the surface. Moments later, he was ushered into the studio. The host, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for cutting to the heart of the story, greeted him warmly. "Mr. Oak, thank you for being here." Jamal nodded. "Thank you for asking the right questions." The segment began, and the host wasted no time. "You've built one of the most successful tech companies in Africa and beyond. Why fly commercial? Why keep a low profile?" Jamal looked into the camera, then answered calmly. "Because I wanted to. Because I shouldn't have to explain my presence in a seat I paid for. My humanity shouldn't need justification." The host nodded, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "And when they asked you to move?" Jamal leaned forward slightly. "I'd been there before. In boardrooms. On sidewalks. At award shows where security assumed I was someone's driver. That moment on the plane wasn't new. It was just the most public version of what happens every day in private." "But you didn't react emotionally." "I did," Jamal corrected. "Just not outwardly. You don't need to shout for your heart to be broken. You don't need to scream to feel humiliated. But I chose a different path. I chose to show that dignity can stand in silence too." The interview ended with applause from the crew behind the cameras. It wasn't a performance, it was truth. And the truth had landed hard. Hours later, back at the hotel, Jamal's phone rang. It was the CEO of Northski Airlines. "Mr. Oak," the voice on the other end began, firm but slightly shaken. "I want to personally apologize for what happened. It does not reflect who we are as a company." Jamal was quiet for a moment. "It reflects what your systems allow." The man cleared his throat. "We've already terminated the lead flight attendant. 2 other crew members have been suspended. And we're launching a mandatory bias training protocol effective immediately." "That's a start," Jamal said. "But if this ends with firings and press statements, you've missed the point. It's not about optics. It's about rebuilding the culture that allowed it." There was silence. "Then, we'd like to partner with SkySync on that. We believe your insight could help us lead this change." Now that was different. Jamal exhaled softly. "Put it in writing. No corporate fluff. Real terms. Measurable change. You'll have it within the hour." They hung up. For a moment, Jamal just stared out the window. Below, the city buzzed. But in here, things felt still, charged, heavy, yet strangely peaceful. He hadn't set out to fire anyone. He wasn't interested in revenge. But for once, the system had been forced to look itself in the mirror. And it didn't like what it saw. The next day, Jamal's return flight was booked, private, this time, arranged by the airline as part of their olive branch. But he insisted on flying out from the same airport, through the same terminal, at the same time. He wanted to see the faces again. The ones that dismissed him. The ones that watched and said nothing. And they were there. As he approached the terminal, a hush spread through the staff. Some nodded respectfully. Others lowered their eyes. But one face stood out, Anna, the flight attendant who had reassigned his seat. She looked paler than he remembered, dressed in civilian clothes, suitcase at her side. Their eyes met. She stepped forward, hesitant. "Mr. Oak." He paused. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I was wrong. I didn't realize who you were." And there it was again, that phrase, Didn't realize who you were. Jamal studied her, then asked softly, "Would you have treated me differently if you did?" She opened her mouth, but the words faltered. He continued, "That's the problem. You shouldn't need to know someone's title to respect their humanity." Tears welled in her eyes. I've lost everything." Jamal tilted his head, voice low but firm. "Then maybe now you understand what it feels like to be dismissed without a fair chance. Maybe next time, if there is a next time, you'll choose better." He didn't say it with cruelty. He said it with clarity. Then he turned and walked past her. At the hangar, the private jet gleamed in the morning sun. But Jamal didn't look at it right away. He stood on the steps, facing the open runway, breathing in the moment. A young black ground crew worker approached, nervously. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I saw the video. My little brother watched it too. He said, he wants to be like you when he grows up." Jamal smiled for real this time. Tell him he already is. He just has to keep walking like he belongs, because he does. As the engines roared to life, Jamal settled into his seat. This time, no one questioned his place. No one asked for his boarding pass. No one suggested he move. Because this time, the whole world was watching. And more importantly, he was done being quiet. The private jet sliced through the clouds like it had something to prove. Jamal sat by the window, his tablet in hand, watching the skies stretch endlessly beyond the glass. Yet his thoughts were far below, rooted in the conversations sparked by a single injustice. What began as a quiet moment of humiliation had unfolded into a global reckoning. And he didn't plan to let it stop there. His inbox was flooded. Messages from CEOs, civil rights organizations, journalists, educators, even high school students. Some shared their outrage, some their stories. But the most powerful were the ones from people who had never spoken up before. People who had lived through the same quiet dismissals, the same moments of being told they didn't belong. Only now, they saw that maybe they weren't alone. A notification lit up on his screen. Live now, airline official press conference. Jamal clicked in. The Northski Airlines CEO stood behind a podium, flanked by corporate board members. This week, the CEO began. "We failed. Not just one passenger, but a principal. Mr. Jamal Oak was subjected to treatment that violated the standards we claim to uphold. And more importantly, it exposed deep gaps in our culture. We accept full responsibility." He went on to announce sweeping changes, mandatory anti-bias training across all departments, a partnership with SkySync Technologies to implement a new monitoring system for staff conduct, and a public review board for passengers to report discrimination without fear of being dismissed or silenced. But what struck Jamal most was the humility. Not just damage control. Real acknowledgement. The clip ended, and Jamal sat back, stunned for a moment by the magnitude of what had been set in motion. Not through rage. Not through protest signs or fiery speeches. But through one man refusing to shrink when the world tried to make him small. A few weeks later, Jamal stood on a stage, not in a boardroom, not on a news set, but at an inner-city school auditorium in Lagos. A crowd of teenagers looked up at him with wide, eager eyes. Some recognized him. Others just saw the man in the suit. But all of them listened. He told them the story. Not of a billionaire CEO. Not of the viral video. But of a boy who once stood at a street corner watching planes fly overhead, wondering if he'd ever step into one, let alone be removed from one for being too successful to be believed. He spoke of shame that wasn't his to carry. Of doors that closed quietly, and battles fought behind smiles. He didn't tell them to fight fire with fire. He told them to light candles. One at a time. Because enough candles in enough dark places could show the way for someone else. When he finished, there was silence. Then one student, a girl no older than 16, stood and asked, "Sir, if they try to silence us, what do we do?" Jamal smiled. Then speak louder by succeeding. Back in his office weeks later, Jamal read through the final report from the airline. Every item he had demanded had been addressed. Not just for PR, but embedded into new policy. He had turned pain into a blueprint. He looked up at the glass wall in front of him. The skyline glittered, but his focus landed on the photo on his shelf, a candid shot of his mother holding his younger self, both smiling despite the ragged clothes. He had made it, but he never forgot the feeling of being made to feel less. That's why he didn't stop. Not with a policy, not with a press conference, but with something lasting. The next time Jamal boarded a flight, it was commercial. His choice. He stepped onto the plane in a simple polo and jeans. No entourage. No announcement. The flight crew greeted him with neutral warmth. No special treatment. No scrutiny. Just human. He took his seat in 1A. Same seat. Same airline. But this time, no one questioned it. No one tried to move him. And that, he thought, was the victory. Not because he was famous. Not because they feared backlash. But because someone had learned. And change, no matter how small, had begun. As the plane took off, Jamal closed his eyes, not to escape, but to rest. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he had to prove anything to anyone. He simply was. And that was enough. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful journeys that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of hope and strength. Join our community. Your support means everything.